How is everybody? Good. That's good to hear. 2 Timothy chapter 3. But understand this, that in the last days, dangerous times of great stress and trouble will come, difficult days that will be hard to bear. For people will be lovers of self, narcissistic, self-focused, lovers of money, impelled by greed, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, and profane. They will be unloving, devoid of natural human affection, calloused and inhumane, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, devoid of self-control, intemperate, immoral, brutal, haters of good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of sensual pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of outward godliness, religion. Although they have denied its power, for their conduct nullifies their claim of faith. Avoid such people and keep far away from them. This has just been on my heart for the past few months, and just seeing everything that's going on, and I remember, you got podcasts today, and that's kind of a normal term you hear, and I remember back in 2004, 2005, listening to podcasts, it was before anybody knew that it was called a podcast. And you'd say, oh, yeah, it's a new podcast coming out, and there's like 3 of them, and it's like, okay, well, it's one of the first podcasts or whatever. But there was this couple that had met online, and they'd actually, I know that the man had been divorced, and then he met this lady online, through this online site or something. But they came together, and they found out. What he found out is, all this stuff that he had never heard before. She showed him the gospel, basically. He'd never seen it like that, in that light before. He'd grown up in a dry, religious but not spirit-filled, church, and just had never seen these things come to reality in his life, and so they started this podcast, back before it was called a podcast. It was just an online show, and they what they did was they would take the news and they would look at it and they would say, okay, let's look at the Bible and see what this news of the day has, what can we find in between the lines, what can we see, what can we study out of this and see where it matches up here. And they did it mostly for like prophetic, to see where the lines kind of matched up. But they would go on every week and they would do this. They would look at the week's news and they would see where all this lines up and how this speaks to prophecy, to prophetic, certain verses. And I would listen to them every week, and it would blow my mind, because I would think, I've never actually heard this, and I'd go and I'd look it up and I'd be like, oh, that's exactly what's going on, and so, on, and now you have hundreds of thousands of these podcast shows, that get on and try to do the same thing, and most of them are pretty good, but it just, I come back to that one show that started that whole genre, and how they looked at the news in a different light. They didn't just take what was on the TV, what was said to them. They looked at it and they said, okay, but this is what's behind this. And this was back when there were people trying to investigate these crimes, but they wouldn't take the spiritual side into account. What's driving this? And they would not find out, oh, there's a layer under here of satanic worship, that caused these groups to do this to this person, and it's like, when you take that layer out, it makes no sense. It looks like chaos. But when you take into account the spiritual layer behind these things, it makes a lot more sense, when you look at it from that perspective. And he would always, and the husband, of this couple, he would always open and close the show by, Ephesians 6:12, we wrestle not against, flesh and blood, powers and principalities. He would open and close that because that's what they were doing. They were looking in behind the news, the face of it, seeing what was actually in behind it. And today, we're at a critical point in the world. I mean, not just this country, but you look at all across the world, and they're I talk about it every time. There are riots, there's hatred, there's people dying for their faith. All this stuff is going on. It's gone on for ages, but we're starting to see important mile markers. If you think about it as a highway, we're starting to see important mile markers that denote these things that have been spoken about, that have been prophesied, coming up, coming forward, as relating to the end times, So you see it, I see it, but there are a lot of people that don't, there are a lot of people that are just, they see what's going on. They don't want to investigate because they have no framework to put that in, so they don't see it. So I would say that they are asleep. They're asleep to that underlying layer that ties everything together. So we go to Matthew 24. Verse 42. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. And also look this up in the Amplified. Watch therefore, give strict attention, be cautious and active, for you do not know in what kind of a day, whether a near or remote one, your Lord is coming. And then in the same chapter, verse 36, go back a few verses. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So, only God knows this day that's spoken of, this day where everything is going to be judged. This is the final opportunity, before God just says, okay, that's it. I've had enough. This level has been reached, and I've had enough of this. We see a lot of things coming down the road here, and it's sickening. To be honest, to be just blunt about it, it's sickening. God will send the signs just as He always does, to His people that are actually watching, who are awake and watching. We will be able to see those signs if we're awake, if we're in that close relationship with Him. We can see those signs. Joel 2, starting in verse 28, and all this is in the Amplified. It shall come about after this that I shall pour out my Spirit on all mankind, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on the male and female servants I will pour out my Spirit in those days. I will show signs and wonders displaying my power in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. And it shall come about that whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved from the coming judgment. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as the Lord has said, even among the remnant of survivors whom the Lord calls. So if we are awake at that point, if we are spiritually active, spiritually being cautious about what's going on around us, if we're firmly planted on that cornerstone of Christ, we will see these things coming. He is going to show us. There's going to be signs in the heavens. There's going to be all these things that will come up that we will see. We'll be able to tell, we'll differentiate. Okay, something is different here. This is it. This is a sign from God. He is showing us something, and it's a serious word. Just as you said, it's not something to play around with. This has meaning behind it. In Matthew 24 again, and Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows, and shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endureth unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall come the end. Now, if 13, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Endure, patience, spiritually active, spiritually aware, spiritually, okay, God, I need to be in tune with you, every single day. I need to get up. I need to be synced with you. I want your will. I want your mind. If we constantly have him set there in the middle, in the focus, in the focal point, that is going to be the key. That's being spiritually aware. In other words, don't fall asleep. Matthew 26, verse 40, 41, and he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, What could ye not watch with me in 1 hour? Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So when we start to doze off, we need to remember, that those who fall asleep miss the Lord. That's a very serious and scary thing to contemplate. Those who fall asleep miss the Lord. They miss everything He has. And that's not just at that time when the end of days are here. That's every day. When those who fall asleep miss the Lord, we miss everything He has for us. Talking about news, talking about things that are relevant, today. I'm sure everyone's heard about it. I've heard people talk about it, but there's bills that had been passed, into law in New York. There's a couple more states, Rhode Island, I believe. Virginia tried, to pass a bill. And just talking about this subject and in defending, first, second, third trimester abortion, it's like, oh, well, third, that's pushing the line, when any of it is death. I mean, it's death. It's all death. It's all sin. It's all lawlessness. But, New York passed a law saying that this is okay, up until the day of birth. Up until the day of birth, that this child, this baby can be aborted. This is the kind of thing that turns your stomach. If you think about it, it turns your stomach. And to hear, I heard a clip of the Virginia governor explaining on a radio show to these people who they're just clueless. They don't know how abortions work apparently, and how this bill would be a lot better for whatever reason in his mind. Just to hear this smooth, calm talk of this governor, well, what would happen, is we would lay this baby on a table, we put it in clothes, wrap it in swaddling clothes, which I thought, interesting choice of words there, but, and then a discussion would ensue about the future of this child, and I'm thinking, is this guy not hearing himself? This is, and you want to be angry at these people, but then again, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. There's an underlying spirit here. There's an underlying layer that we have to look at. The love of many shall wax cold. That's exactly what that is. That's waxing. It's frigid. And going back to the New York one that actually did pass, I'm not sure if it's been challenged or not, but it did pass, and I remember 3.5 years ago, I actually showed a video up here, and they had taken the Empire State Building, and they had projected a Hindu goddess, Kali, on it, and it just, at the time I'm like, why would you do that over your city? Why would you put that goddess of destruction, that, goddess of death over your city? Why would you do that? But this is what New York is, that's what they do now, they celebrate these things. They lit up the spire of the World Trade Center in pink, because this bill passed, last week. This is what they do. They celebrate death. This is the level of lawlessness that is raging, underneath everything. So when you put that up, that image up, and millions of people around the city can see it, it's like, oh, well, that, and I seen tweets that day, it's like, oh, well, Callie looks spectacular up there, and it's a picture of a demon, on this building. There's no other word, just a demon with, all the things that you would think of when you hear demon, and so if we look at Psalm 16, verse 4, the sorrows, pain, and suffering of those who have chosen another god will be multiplied because of their idolatry. I will not pour out their drink offerings of blood, nor will I take their names upon my lips. This is serious. This is, God is serious about idolatry. He's serious about just taking someone and esteeming them above. We can't have God anywhere in the public. This has to be stopped. We can't have the Ten Commandments. We can't have a cross. We can't have this stuff on public land. Oh, somebody's got to buy this land privately to put a cross up, so it's visible from the interstate. I know that there was a big battle about, because there's certain places. There's a place in Chattanooga. There's certain places where you drive around and there's this huge cross, and I'm like, I wonder how many battles they had to go through to keep that up, because there are thousands of people driving past this every day, so, a lot of times someone will privately buy that land, and put that cross up, because, that's, if it's any part of public land, government, there's a battle coming, and you better believe that they're coming out with guns blazing. So, so the judgment has been cast. If you esteem a god a lesser god, a demon, or a representation of a demon, on over a city, that city's, God's clear here, you've chosen another god, your pain and suffering will be multiplied, because of idolatry, because of that, that's this is the one you chosen, you choose death and destruction, you'll get death and destruction multiplied, so that is how serious it is. In Acts chapter 17, verse 30, or starting in verse 30. Therefore God overlooked and disregarded the former ages of ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. That is, to change their old way of thinking, to regret their past sins, and seek God's purpose for their lives. Because he has set a day when he will judge the inhabited world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed and destined for that task. And he has provided credible proof to everyone by raising him from the dead. This is still the time of opportunity. You see people that, like I said, that say these things, that do these things, and you're just, it kindles anger, but there's still time for them, there's still time for them. We need to continue to pray for people that are in these positions of power and authority. There's still time for them to see the destruction, the sin that they're proposing, that they're endorsing. But God has a time where that is going to end. That is, that opportunity is going to end, and that's scary. People that are in this situation, and those who allow it, those who go along with it, are just as guilty, and that's scary for a nation. It's scary for a state, a legislature, whatever, that passes these bills into law. And I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here and talk about judgment, talk about these things. And the past couple of times I've talked about having hope in the middle of that storm, in the middle of that fire, and seeing that one bright spot, and just staying focused on God, and just leaving everything in His hands, and having that hope in the middle of all that. But I'm really, like I've said before, I'm a science nerd, but I really enjoy science. I enjoy all these things, all the new discoveries, and how this works and how that works. And you see these pictures, of planets and different things, and so I kind of keep up on like the earthquakes, different things that happen, different things that what causes the earthquake, over here is, why doesn't it happen over here or over there, what causes it. I like to see the underlying mechanics of things that happen. And, it interests me to say, okay, this happens over here and that's what causes this. Just like an earthquake in Japan can cause a tsunami in Hawaii. It's like, 100, 200 years ago, this stuff was like, okay, we got a big wave one day. I don't know what happened, but something happened. We got a big wave, It's like there was nothing really behind it that we don't understand it, And I like that science explains these things. But some people, look to that and say, okay, yeah, science explains how nature works, and that's what they explain it as. But I see it, this is how God moves this over here, and this is what happens, and that's judgment, and going back to the verse about where Christ is like saying, look around you, all this stuff is going to be, there's not going to be one stone left on top of another. talking about the temple. And I listened to a podcast this last week, and they were talking about this guy. He's a Christian. He actually retired and was bored, so his wife was like, "Why don't you go back to school?" So he went to school and got a doctorate in archaeology of some sort. And he went over, for whatever reason, he perseverated on this this question of, okay, we should be able to see evidence of, like, Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction. We should be able to see, there should be some sort of evidence if this happened the way they said it happened. So he goes over there, and he's doing this dig, and he's just looking at all these things. Well, he finds everyone else is looking in the south, I think the southeast side of the Dead Sea. He started at the northeast side. He thought that the way the Bible described it, he thought that that's the more direction that it would be. So he started looking there. He started digging. Had this huge dig going on. They started finding this pottery. Well, the funny thing about the pottery was from that era that this pottery was found in, the level that they dug to, it was glazed. It was glazed pottery. You get glazed pottery by superheating it, And, he's like, well, this, glazed pottery didn't come into, popularity until this era, and this, is way down here, way back. So he started looking at it. He actually sent some of the pottery to a laboratory, and they found out that it was so thick, and at a certain depth, they could find, like, where it had burned, underneath the glaze. So they knew that it was superheated, and that's why that pottery glazed. And they started figuring out, every morning they would get back to their dig site, and everything would be white. They would dig up some more, and then they'd come back, and everything would be white the next day. Well, what it was is there was so much salt in the ground that this stuff would crystallize overnight. And anyway, basically, and they found these foundations, but there were no stones left on the foundations. It was just like it was sheared off. And basically what he had kind of thought was, okay, if I want to think about this scientifically, what God could have done to this city here, that, of course no one's going to believe that it's Sodom and Gomorrah or Sodom or whatever. But he said, what looks like happened, he said, all this stuff was pushed one way. So what looks like happened is something exploded over the Dead Sea, threw water up over the city, at the same time superheating, shoving everything, just shearing it off at the ground level, basically just shearing it off. And he said everything fell the same direction. And I thought, that's amazing that they can tell that much, from so long ago. But he said, he's like, I truly believe that, that's why there was so much salt in the soil. It was not inhabitable for so many hundreds of years afterwards, because nothing would grow there, because there's so much salt in the soil. And I thought, man, this guy's done his work, and I thought that's amazing, to kind of hear that. And so there was a main route that city was on, so people would have to travel past this city, and look and see this destruction, not be able to stay there because there's nothing there that's life supporting, So, this is what happened. This is what happens when God judges a town, a city, or a community. And it just it was an interesting interview, to say the least. And this guy just had every little point that was the questions and everything that a scientist could throw out. He could say, okay, this is why this could be this. This is why. He had all this, but in order to publish this, he got this peer-reviewed. He published this in a scientific journal. The only way he could publish it was they told him, they said, do not use the name of Sodom or Gomorrah or anything like that. You do that, and your work will not get published. He's like, okay, so I want this information out there, but I'm not willing to completely get it blacklisted. So I'm going to use the current name of the area. So that's what he did. But I thought it was interesting, because 100 years ago, when you have the Tunguska event where, you had an explosion over the Siberian wilderness that flattened 800 miles of trees, in a radial pattern, it's like something blew up and pushed everything down away from it in a circular pattern. When you have that kind of thing, 100 years ago, they didn't know what happened there. It's like, okay, what caused that? They didn't know. And it amazes me because science is slowly catching up to the Bible. The Bible already explains this. The Bible knows what happened. The Bible has it here, black and white, and science is slowly catching up. It's like, okay, this does happen. This fire from heaven, that does happen. And that wipes out cities, that does happen. Well, it's kind of funny to me, to see, scientists talking on TV. Well, we don't know the meaning of this, and maybe one day we'll figure it out, and it's like, but if you think about it biblically, it's already there, it's already there. But we just don't know the mechanics. We know that it does happen, and so, I was watching this guy. He talks about the sun. He talks about, every day he gets on, he'll talk about earthquakes that happen. The reason that we get this cold blast of air once every week or whatever. What drives that polar vortex. He talks about all this stuff. And these different changes that are happening. By the way, he's not a fan of the human-caused climate change. Climate is changing. He's just not a fan of it's because we're driving too many cars. He's like, well, this is happening on the other planets, and it's evident there. It's like, well, of course it's not caused by us primarily, but I mean he looks at all this stuff, and he stumbled upon this thing, this guy that did some videos, and he was talking about just a massive explosion that could explain like certain things, that could explain certain things, and I'm not going to get all into that, but basically what he talked about, if you're looking at it just through a natural, natural carnal humanistic view, it's terrifying. What that could do. It's terrifying. I mean, it explains the sun going dark and the moon going red at the same time, which does not happen in a lunar eclipse. It does not happen in a solar eclipse. It's like, okay, the sun darkens and the moon goes red. How does that happen at the same time? Science is like, it's the Bible. You don't have to listen to that. It's in the Bible. Which, throw it out until 50 years later they thought, oh, this explains this perfectly. Well, it was in here the whole time. The sun darkens, the moon glows red, but a fervent heat going through the solar system would cause the moon to glow red like a rock, like an ember, and also could cause the sun to go dark for a certain amount of time. But so these things are like, if you get into this and watch, these hour-long videos of how he explains it, it's very terrifying if you're looking at it through just a natural lens, and he's got a group of people that he talks with and stuff, and they were kind of freaked out when they first heard it, but because it's very terrifying. But if you look at it in with a spiritual lens, if you look at this stuff, this underlying layer that people in the world will not see, they won't get, and they will just discount it. It's not that frightening, because it's already been said. In Luke 21, verse 25, there will be signs attesting miracles in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on earth there will be distress and anguish among nations, in perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea and of the waves, people fainting from fear of the expectation of the dreadful things coming on the world, for the very powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with transcendent, overwhelming power, subduing the nations with great glory. Now when these things begin to occur, stand tall and lift up your heads in joy, because suffering ends as your redemption is drawing near. It's just basically going through, when these things are happening and everyone's like shaking in their boots, everyone's falling down, everyone's having heart attacks because they don't understand it. They have no framework to put this in, and everything is just such a scary sight. It's like, look up, lift your heads up in joy. How does that work? How does someone who's just looking at this naturally say, lift your heads up in joy, when this is happening? Because this is the signs that he's talking about, that this is going to show up. This is going to show up, and when people know what they're looking at, people are spiritually aware, they're not asleep, that this stuff is going to speak volumes. Now, speaking about people that will be shaken, the world's going to be shaken, the heavens are going to be shaken. All these things are going to just come tumbling down. All these constructs that humans have, I'm financially sound here, I've got a good job, I've got all this stuff. All these things that are rock solid in their minds, well, I got a savings account and I've got a 401k, I'm all right, All these things that are solid in our minds, come crumbling down. Where's our foundation? And that's the big thing I see right now is there's so many people that cling to these things, and if one thing would get shaken down or whatever, it's going to be the end of the world for them, not for everyone else, but it'll be where am I supposed to turn now? What am I going to do? Stressing out and grasping at straws. In Isaiah 28, verse 16, therefore the Lord says this, listen carefully, I am laying in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone for the secure foundation, firmly placed. He who believes, who trusts in, relies on, and adheres to that stone will not be disturbed or give way in sudden panic. That's our answer. That cornerstone, speaking of Christ, that cornerstone is Christ. So as long as that is our foundation of which we measure everything off of, that's the whole foundation is measured off the cornerstone. And I got to thinking about, I don't mean to pick on anything, but Catholicism, they talk about, Peter as being the first pope, and they, call back to, on this rock, I will build my church. And I got to thinking about it, and I looked up the Greek, and most languages, at least most European languages that I've heard of, I've kind of studied on, most European languages have a masculine and a feminine denotation to their words. A lot of time, like in Spanish, you'll have like a table is masculine, or a table is feminine, and something else, chair is masculine, or what, it's kind of like thrown everywhere. You don't really know, what it is unless you kind of can tell from the endings of the words. Well, I was just curious of what, Peter's name was in Greek, Petros, but that's the masculine form. Okay, the feminine form is Petra, which I'm sure people have heard. There's a famous, old stone city in I forget, it's Jordan, I believe, Petra. That's where like buildings are carved out of rock, out of the side of a cliff, and all these things are carved out of solid stone. Petros is defined as this in the Greek, is a shifting, rolling, or insecure stone, while Petra is a solid, immovable rock. And it goes to show, it's not that, if you build your church on Peter, you're shifting, rolling, and you're insecure, you're all over the place. That's not what I would call a good cornerstone to build anything off of. So, that was news to me. I'd never seen that before, and I'd never really known what Peter's name was based off of in the Greek. But it's not like a slight towards Peter, because Peter was human. He failed. There was different things that that Christ said, look, you're going to deny me 3 times. I know this, but I'm still going to love you. This is going to happen. You're not perfect. Other words, you're not perfect. You're shifting, you're rolling around, you're insecure, but that's why we're called to put our foundation on that solid, immovable rock. That solid, immovable rock, when it's not shifting. Not Peter, Christ. That was so eye-opening to me when I looked that up. In Ephesians 2, verse 19. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are builded together for a habitation of God through the Spirit. And last time I spoke, I used an example of being in that courtyard of the King. The King wanting us to dwell with Him. Wanting us to dwell right there in the center. And we try to stay on the outer skirts. We try to set up our tent out there by the fence. I want to be here, but I don't want to be here. It's like, I want to be close, but I don't want to be completely open and close to God. And this is reinforcing that. It's now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. He wants you there. He wants you to dwell with Him. And that's where our foundation has to be. If our foundation is not there, when these things come up, when we start seeing these things, these things that are disgusting right now that we see in the news, that we see these things happening, these things that are just blatantly, it's murder, blatantly. How can someone say, well, she was pregnant when she was killed, so it's a double murder, but they count it then. But okay, we can just whatever. It's blatant to us because we can see the underlying layer, that spiritual layer. We see that through a spiritual view. And Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth into a holy temple in the Lord. So it doesn't do us any good if we're this section of wall over here, and then we got a section of wall over here, and we got a section of wall over here, and okay, Christ is right about here, but we're not together. We're not fitly framed together. How are we ever going to stand? Those walls fall over. So how are we going to stand as a church when we're not fitly framed together? When we're not interlocked with Jesus as our cornerstone? So these things have to be shown to us. They're a benefit to God's people. These things that we can see, that we can clearly denote, hey, there is something demonic about this. Everybody's like, oh no, it's just pro-choice, man. Pro-choice. We all have our own way. It's like, no. I used to listen. There was a song that I listened to a long time ago, and I was kind of into the rock, and it was kind of, I guess it was considered like pop rock or something. But there was a song that I listened to, and I liked the music so much I never really listened to the words. And when I started listening to the podcast back around 2004, 2005, it started kind of opening my ears to these things that were being said in these songs. And this song would say, we're going in the same direction. We'll get there different ways, but we're going in the same direction. And it's like, no, I think, after, thinking about it, I'm like, No, I'm pretty sure there's one way, I'm pretty sure that there's not different ways to the same place. I mean, that wouldn't be a narrow path in my mind. If there's three narrow paths to one direction, I don't think I want to go there. It becomes a thing that is so subtle. If you are not spiritually aware, spiritually cautious, and girded up in truth, then you're going to be deceived. And that's the first thing that Jesus said. How do we tell when these things are coming up? What's the time frame here? Be not deceived, because that is the most important thing. Be not deceived, because if we're deceived, then what else is there? I mean, it's like, if you're not guiding off that cornerstone, you're going to have to start all over. There's no way to reconcile that. If you're not guiding from the start, from that cornerstone, you're going to have corners that don't match up throughout the house. If you're not fitly joined at that cornerstone, that foundation. So these things that are coming, we see these things, we can identify them as demonic, as everything but good. Are they dark? Yes, they're incredibly dark. Just as I said, how can somebody just, smoothly just talking, saying this is the process of third term abortion or third trimester abortion, or post-birth abortion. This is the process. I'm gonna give it to you in a low monotone voice. Just we're gonna, this is how it's gonna be. It's so deceptive, because when I heard him talking, I was like, if he could be saying anything else, he would kind of sound like a lot of pastors. This is how it's going to work. This is the first step, and we're going to set it over here. We're going to put it in swaddling clothes. It's like, I couldn't understand why it's not obvious. And I didn't watch the State of the Union address. You say what you can about people in leadership, but there's no one perfect. And I believe that Obama was put in there to show us how far gone we were. I believe there's been other people put in there to show how far gone we were. But when you have a president at this hour stand up there and say, children are made in the holy image of God, I applaud that. And when you have people out there sitting on their hands when these things they're said and these truths are spoken, you can just see that under that level there it's not visible on the surface. It's not visible through a natural perspective. You see them sitting there, and you're like, you're a human being. This is another human being. Would you have been okay with this when you were 5 years old? Would you look over and see this baby laying there? Oh, that baby needs to die, or that baby, deserves death, or pro-choice. This stuff took hold of them. This spirit took hold of them at some point, and desensitized them to this reality, to this truth. This thing that was spoken. Children are made in the holy image of God. I applaud that. There's a lot of things that I don't applaud, but but that's one thing that I thought, when in this environment, and it may have been just to get points, and it may have just been to increase poll numbers or whatever, but it's just like somebody standing up there and saying, Jesus Christ is the truth, is the one truth, is the one way, and they stand up there and say that, people are going to hear what's being said. People are not going to see the motives behind it, but I applaud that, and there were 76% people that watched that, that approved of that speech, which that gives me a lot more hope than I did have for the country, because that people from both sides were tuning into that. It was a main event. This was a postponed main event. This was, okay, we're going to see, is the donkey or the elephant going to win here? It's like, all right, let's gear up and get our popcorn, believe it or not, I saw people, putting on Facebook, we got our popcorn for the for the State of the Union. I'm like, bread and circuses, I guess, but dog and pony, whatever you want to use. But I mean, when you have 72% across every party, across all independents, whatever, say, they approved of this speech, it gives me a lot more hope, and I just applaud that, because, in this hour, there's so much hate, so much evil, so much of this, everything with the abortion, everything with the just descending into immorality. It's refreshing to see sometimes that's still the minority in this country. People don't generally want third trimester abortions. They don't generally agree with the governor of Virginia, but when we look at everything, and it's incredibly dark, we have to remember there is a reconciler, an avenger of the innocent, a conqueror of iniquity, a refuge for his people, for those who call to him.